Libby Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Hey Libby, how you doing?
I'm doing great this morning. How about you?
Just dandy.
So, we're here to talk today about substance use prevention. And to start off our conversation today, can you share with our listeners, from your perspective, what's most concerning to you right now when it comes to youth alcohol use and vaping in the community, Western North Carolina, where you're coming from? And how are young people themselves thinking about some of these behaviors?
I think the most concerning thing, alcohol, it's less of an issue than with the vaping, but in both cases, you have so many substances now that aren't just they're not straight out what they used to be. Like, alcohol used to just be alcohol, right? Now you got THC laced alcohol that's being sold in all kinds of. I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday about how an adult accidentally got a hold of something like that, a drink, and literally said they lost 20 minutes
Mhm.
because they ingested something they didn't think they were getting and we're really out of it. Literally lost some time. So you have that, and then it's even more of an issue, I think, with like vaping. Nicotine vapes we're hearing are getting laced with all kinds of stuff, right? It's always been a concern. The lack of regulation was always an issue, but it's even more so now. And in terms of how youth are thinking about things, I think, this is the problem, right? Like we know that 9 out of 10 people who end up with some form of a substance use disorder initiate use in some form or fashion before the age of 18, right? It's just, and it's really a biological thing. It's a developmental thing. It's like the things are still cooking in the brain. And so when you introduce a substance, whatever that is, it changes things. I used to use the example of, if I put something in maps on my phone, there was a time at least when I could change the path. Like I could go in there and I could choose a different path, and I think of the wiring in the brain in a similar fashion. It's like it's meant to be wired in a certain way, but we can definitely alter it, intentionally or not. And I think kids, one, they just, don't think about consequences. Nothing is a big deal. It's like, oh, it's, sure, I'll try that, whatever. There's no way if adults are struggling to absorb all this information and stay on top of it, I don't know how we expect kids to. On a positive note, though, I will say I think one thing that's really changed with youth, there was when I was young, we heard a lot about peer pressure and how that could influence choices and, kids feeling like they had to do something to fit in. I don't think that's as much of an issue these days. I think young people have more of a you do you kind of mindset, which has its pros and its cons, right? But I think there's less pressure to do things in order to fit in. It's more, but there's maybe not as much disapproval either, right? It's like there where's the gatekeeping, I guess, for looking out for each other to say, hey, are you sure that's a great idea? I don't know. So
That's excellent points. That reminds me of you think about kids and like how our brains are wired throughout our lifespan, but really when we're kids, it's wired to play, to connect, to
mhm.
try things, right? That's what being a kid is about in some way, shape, or form, is trying new things and figuring out. And if it didn't work, well, now we know what to do next time, right? So
Mhm.
that's like the learning process, yeah. So there's this playfulness about being kids and trying anything. It reminds me of 80s, early 80s moment on the show. We've never gone this early with 80s, but
Oh
remember
man.
the Life cereal commercials with Mikey, like he'll try anything. And so I'm dating myself now, but there was an
I
80s
remember
commercial
that
with
too.
that. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So, it's similar to that where there's this I don't know, like uniqueness about being a kid that, yeah, I'm going to try that. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, oh well. And then when you navigate and skate into the realm of substance use, or, um, altering, the things that are going to alter your brain, yeah, it's really scary to know the amount that's out there for kids to just try, or just anybody, but really, focusing on kids here, like just to try, um, without regard, without that, thinking ahead of what's going to happen. So I love the points that you just brought up. Let me um, let's talk a little bit about this social norms campaign, right? So for folks who may not be familiar with social norms campaign, can you explain what a social norm campaign is and why you saw it as a good fit for addressing youth substance use?
Sure. Yeah. I don't claim to be a subject matter expert on this, although I have had a fair amount of training on it. And actually, positive social norms campaigns have been around for some time. I think the earliest uh, information I have on it, it goes back to at least 2010, but probably before that, 2000 maybe. I don't know. Um, but I think when people hear that term, positive social norms, they might assume it's a campaign intended to promote positive social norms or to change norms in a positive direction. That's not really the case. A positive social norms campaign emphasizes that the prevailing norms are already positive, right? So I really love this whole approach. When I was in school early in my career, in the human services field, I learned about taking a strengths-based approach. We have this tendency, I was thinking earlier about how when if you're in the market for a home or a vehicle or anything, our default is to like find all the things that might be wrong with it. And if we only focused on what's wrong with a house in particular, nobody would ever nobody would ever own a home, right? So you have to have the ability to also identify, hey, what's working here? What's good here? Um, but that tends to be our default to focus on everything that's wrong. And the positive norms concept focuses on the fact that yes, there are definitely concerns. I've heard the phrase like hope and concern living side by side, right? Like you don't eliminate one or the other. They coincide really. So yes, there are problems. There are definitely concerns. We definitely have kids using younger and younger. We have kids using much more potent substances and experiencing much more serious consequences, ending up in the hospital because of kind of psychotic issues related to substance use. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but uh, the flip side of that is that the vast majority of our youth still are not using. And that often gets lost in the conversation. And why this is all important is that the greatest explanation I've heard is what's perceived as real is real in its consequences. And if you've ever had a conversation with someone that went wrong, or an email that elicited a response that you were not expecting because like you thought you had said everything very clearly or politely or you went into a situation with the best of intentions and then somebody responded not the way you expected at all, right? Like came back really hot. I think most of us have had that type of experience. Well, that's a great example of what's perceived as real is real in its consequences. Doesn't matter what you intended or thought you communicated. Like if it was received in a different way, like there's a fallout from that. So when even though there's not, I think, the same amount of peer pressure that there used to be, when youth think that, or adults for that matter, okay, this can influence parental decisions as well. If people think, oh, all these kids are doing this, they're all doing it.
Right.
Well, then that creates a different set of expectations. It intentionally or not, may lead to a different set of decision making, right? Whereas when we can bridge that gap and help people recognize, well, that's really not true. Like most kids are making healthy choices. Most kids are choosing pro-social things that don't involve substance use, for example. Then we can really that builds a protective factor that reduces the risk factor of thinking, oh, everybody's doing it, so I might as well too. What the heck? And we have found that we started since we started this campaign, we have been educating adults because we realized adults need to be on board with this as well. We don't want adults saying, "Oh, I don't believe that either," you know? And sure enough, when we ask adults what percentage of youth they think are using alcohol and nicotine vapes, for example, it's much higher than what we have, the data says. So,
It's and, you shared earlier, I believe we've all swam in a sea of texts and emails that we thought we sent out pretty, in a good way, and then it came back and
innocuously,
it's like, yeah, like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not what the intention was.
right.
But yeah, yeah, part of what I was thinking when you were talking about this concept of like, well, everybody's doing it, whether it's a child, a youth, or an adult or a parent. I mean, it's like this all or nothing approach, right? So it's just sort of this illogical thinking of all, everyone, always, these words that sort of capture a false perception of what's really happening. And one thing I really liked you shared with us is that hope and concern can coexist in the same space.
Mhm,
It doesn't have to be one or the other,
mhm.
and more than two. You could have hope, concern, you could have despair, you can have, you know, vision. There's all these different things that can coexist. And I feel like at times adults, tend to just put everything in silos. And when you put things in silos, then it becomes really hard to have that hope part of it is if you're only concerned, like if you're only looking at the concern. Does that make sense? Like if you're only
Yeah.
looking at the concern part of it. So yeah, lovely. I agree. Like th those things you can have hope and you can also have concern.
And I think another really important element of this is, I've heard it also explained like you, you're going to get to some degree what you focus on. I know it's kind of a generational thing. Everybody nowadays likes to talk about manifesting things, right? I'm convinced that the sports commentator curse is real, by the way. So, um, to the annoyance.
I'm a Duke fan.
Oh no,
Yes.
Roger. Okay, well, we'll
Gina.
talk later. Um, but but yeah, but I think there is some truth to the fact that if like when we're sending out messages, right, to the public, if what we want is to build to grow the good, as they say, or to build on the strengths that are there, like we can't be constantly talking about everything that's wrong. Um, Again, it's not that we don't talk about it at all. It's not that we don't address it, but if what you want is to it's like anything. I mean, if you're trying to change your eating habits, if you're trying to establish, you become more active, like you can't focus on what you're not doing. You have to decide, okay, this is what I want to do differently, or I need to do more of this. What am I already doing that I can do more of? How can I build on that? I mean, it's just kind of the way it is, and we have to train our some. I think for some people it comes much more naturally than for others, and some of us we really have to train our brains. One of the best pieces of feedback I got when I was talking to a group of adults about this campaign was it was someone who's involved with juveniles in I mean youth who are in the juvenile justice system. Okay, and that's all they see is the worst case situations, and to my surprise that was the person in the room that said, I'm really glad to get this information. This I needed to hear this because this gives me some hope. But when all you see is the worst case is it can't, you do, that's all you see. You see what you expect to see. So,
Well, yeah, it's definitely true that we kind of see the world through the lenses that we have, and sometimes that perception is real and sometimes that perception is misguided. I was looking and preparing for our interview today, looking over some of the images that you put together for this social norms campaign. And the way you kind of approached it was trying to share information. So it says 90% of youth do not vape or do not use alcohol. Which is really communicating this whole idea that like alcohol and vaping use among youth is not the norm; it's the exception. And it has images of youth doing things like athletics or outdoors activities or playing with friends, any of those kind of things that, show that normative behavior for youth. So I'm curious though about how you kind of came up with some of these ads and kind of what decisions you went into it. So before launching this social norms campaign, you invested in gathering input from young people directly, which I think is a great idea. Can you talk about how you used those focus groups, kind of what it was like, and why it was important for you to talk to youth before starting this campaign?
sure. Well, first off, I want to address what you said about, the nature of the images, the ads. When it comes to a positive norms campaign, it's very cut and dry. Like, um, I don't claim to be a marketing expert. That was one of the rude awakenings I had going into prevention was all of a sudden I've got to learn how to create a marketing plan and I got to learn about advertising and all these things. And um, but with a positive norms campaign, it's like it's very specific. Like there's a gap, there's a belief that isn't true. You're working to correct that misperception, and you're just sharing this information. That's all it is, right? But that said, to your point, Drew, it was really important to us well, it's important to us that no matter what we put out, right, we want it to resonate with the target audience in our part of the world. So, as Roger and I were discussing earlier, we are part of a pretty broad region that's called Western North Carolina. But within Western North Carolina, there are distinct differences. Um, and the far west, where we reside, is by and large very rural, much different, geographically much different from other parts of the state. And so any messaging that we send out, we want it to feel authentic. We want it to, get people's attention. And to be honest with you, we always really targeted adults with our messaging. How can adults support youth? How can they create environments where kids are safer and, the healthy choice is the easier choice, that sort of thing. So we knew it would be different targeting youth and that can be a little nerve-wracking actually, like how do we reach them? And so yeah, it was really important to get some feedback. And we basically, once we got the images, the ads designed, and that took quite a bit of time. It was a process. We wanted to test them out and see, okay, what do you guys think of this? Just tell us what you think. And we did learn a lot of interesting things. I think by and large, the response was positive. But one thing, and I've heard this no matter what kind of campaign it is, when you're dealing with youth, a lot of times adults will come up with stuff and they're like, "Oh, I love this. This is, great." And then the kids like, no, that's the one they don't like, right? Like for example, we had an image that I thought was great of some young people like out hiking, and we are blessed to have all this natural beauty, and lots of people do hike. But the middle schoolers said to us, yeah, nobody who lives here actually does that. Or nobody our age who lives here does that. Now they might be out hunting and fishing. Um, but so it's like, oh, okay. We also got confirmation that the misperception is real because they're like, oh yeah, they didn't think it could be true, like the stat. And at
Hmm.
first that was a little unsettling, like, oh, well, shoot, they don't believe the sad. But that was the whole point. It was like, that's exactly why we need to do this, because this isn't this isn't the perception, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Libby, it sounds like these focus groups were very helpful. They unpacked some things that perhaps y'all thought wasn't really something to consider or think about. And it's really great that y'all included this youth perception of, or and the youth voice of what should this look like?
Mhm.
Because at sometimes certain groups aren't included in the process of whether it's a campaign or a program or you fill in the blank. And then when it doesn't work, it's almost like this, well, see, we tried and it didn't work.
Hmm.
Well, what voice was missing, right? Like who wasn't at the table that should have been at the table? So can you talk a little bit about what other way, like besides making those shifts that y'all made based on the feedback y'all got back, what other ways did these focus groups help y'all create a message that was going to be an impactful message for this campaign?
I think again, kind of helping in some cases confirm images that we thought would resonate and then pointing to others that maybe wouldn't feel as authentic. That's probably the biggest thing because like I said, the messaging is pretty simple, pretty streamlined. Um, there was something else I was going to say about all that and I've lost it. This might be one of those parts you have to cut out. Um, I did pretty well up until this point.
No, you got it. It's fine.
Um, I think, well, also messaging, like how best to get these things in front of youth. That's probably one of the challenges. I know we discussed that with the kids that we were able to assemble. First off, that's a challenge. Just, getting a group of kids the right age and um just the logistics involved with that can be a little tricky and it was important to us that those groups be representative of kids across our region. I feel like we were pretty successful. We were able to talk with some really rural students in our target age range. Um, but also I think just how we would get the messages in front of like we did something a little different this time too in the way of streaming. We've done digital advertising before, but it was usually in conjunction with like a print publication. And so we knew that probably the number one way we were going to have to get stuff in front of kids was through digital formats. Now, the things that they might throw out as, primary platforms we're not necessarily we didn't necessarily have the capacity to go there. For one thing, I've always been taught that like if you're gonna set up a site or whatever an account, for example, if you're gonna set up an account that's youth focused, like it also needs to be very much youth driven, and we didn't have the capacity for that. So, but we did look at, okay, where are some places that we might be able to get at? Just like anytime I get on Spotify, I get on whatever, YouTube, like stuff pops up, right? So this is the first time that we've really done a lot with that. But in addition to that, we were like, this was a great opportunity to um, collaborate with some of our longstanding community partners in new ways. Uh, getting posters and banners and stickers into schools and out through some of our youth serving organizations. And like the stickers have gone over great. What kid these days doesn't love putting stickers all over their water bottle or their laptop or whatever? And that is going to be there, hopefully, for the long haul. Um, so yeah, it's like I said, there's challenges that come with it, but I think it's also really great. And, ideally, if you can involve them from the very beginning, that's great. Um, but I'm also a realist and sometimes it's really hard to do that to the full extent that you want. Again, a lot depends on your capacity but it's definitely important to involve them as much as you can and have their voices heard.
I love the kind of the way you described all the different channels that you're reaching people through the digital pieces, the stickers, such a great idea. recognizing that people, see and digest messages in so many different places. And now that it's all been out there, you've been running this campaign for about 3 months now.
Hmm.
What have you been seeing or hearing from parents, community members, from, your contacts at school, some of your community partners? Just curious about how people are responding to this campaign you've been running.
I just had a coworker say to me in the last few days that he, has gotten great feedback. I'd say we've all gotten great feedback because we've all been, as I said, talking with these groups and putting stuff out. And things continue to evolve. Like I had a great conversation recently with a partner at one of the local rec centers, and I said, "Hey, would you all consider putting these banners up?" And they were all over it. They were like, absolutely. And then they were throwing out more suggestions about how we could work with them. Like they do monthly inserts with programming that for the rec center that is, you know, a lot of it's for adults, but some of it's for youth as well. And hey, maybe we could put an ad in there. Um, so yeah, it's been really positive. And I'll be honest, I wasn't really sure how it would go over because I did anticipate that there would be adults who would say, "Oh, that can't be right." I don't believe that. And in fact, they've been really, I think for one thing, we're all hungry for something positive, right? It's nice to hear something positive. But one of the things we also do in sharing this information out is we try to explain where the data came from, why we it's credible, right? Why we can believe it. And I think people sometimes get confused about in their own minds about, the immediate assumption is that, oh, well, people don't really tell the truth when they take these surveys. And yet if you ask someone, well, did you lie when you did an anonymous survey? They're more than likely going to say, well, no. But for some reason, we're ready to believe that everybody else does lie. And I think too, there's a big difference between like, you're taking a questionnaire that's and you're doing this as an individual and the information is going to be tied back to you, right? Versus taking a survey that you're confident is anonymous and there's a big difference there. And we have also learned that sometimes, at least with adults, I don't know about with kids, but like adults tend to trust paper surveys more than they do online surveys. So we try to take those things into consideration too. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here, but yeah. But it's all been good. We've had really good feedback. Yeah.
Well, and it's good to hear that, from your kind of different community partners, and just to get a sense too of just how it's being resonating. And it comes back to we shared at the top of this episode, the story of someone who needed to hear a positive, response to it. So we're getting close to the end of our time with our episode here, and I think we've got an 80s, 90s culture question. I actually have an idea for one, Roger, but if you've got one in your pocket, I don't want to take it away.
Go ahead. I mean, have at it.
So,
It's this is your world, squirrel.
well, we often do like movies or culture or music, but because we're talking about marketing and a social norms campaign, I actually thought it would be awesome to say, what is a ad campaign that you remember from the 80s or 90s
Oh,
that would be like, oh my gosh, like I totally remember that. And I can go first since I'm putting you all a little bit on the spot here. So I feel like I should not, I should at least try to dive in. But I remember when I actually didn't know this at the time because I was a kid. But Coke came out with a new version of its product, and of course, being in Atlanta, you have to know everything about Coke around here. And it was called New Coke, and it kind of failed. Like the people like were not a fan of it, and so then they had to do this whole new branding thing called Coca-Cola Classic. And I remember that jingle, Coca-Cola Classic is always the real thing. And I just laughed because that is like 20 years old and I still remember it. So, we always talk about how like ads don't
Wow.
work, but then like that somehow I still remember these things from, this is probably more than 20 years ago. I guess now 80s and 90s is actually longer than that. So, um, but anyways, that was one that I remembered. So I'll turn it over to you. Roger, you got one?
Yeah. I do actually. Yeah, this is a lot better than my 80s and 90s questions. So actually, I appreciate that because I was thinking I was going to rope in something, but no, this is great. I mean, I'm going to go with the classic Michael Jordan Gatorade commercial, like Mike.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Who didn't want to be like Mike after drinking Gatorade? And then like as you saw the commercial, you would just I go out and like dribble a basketball. Say, all right, what can I do? And then I'm not going to dunk. But actually, we had one of those basketball goals that you could lower. And so yeah, not going to dunk on a 10-foot basketball goal. But if I lower it to 6.5 foot, maybe I could be like Mike after drinking the Gatorade. So I'm going with like Mike Gatorade, Michael Jordan Gatorade
Oh, what
commercial.
a good answer. Good answer. Michael Jordan gets a lot of love in this podcast.
He does. He does.
This is kind of tough for me, but because I just have like fleeting images of ads, but you're singing that little jingle, which I'm thoroughly impressed with, Drew. Did remind me that there was, I believe it was during that time frame, probably 80s, maybe that there was a like McDonald's, one of their many iterations. There
Hmm.
was like a Big Mac song, right? Like it was like you
Yeah.
sang the whole, like this is how you build a Big Mac.
Oh, wow.
That I recall. Yeah,
Two
I
whole
could
beef
go
patty,
back
special
farther, but
sauce, lettuce, cheese,
Sausage,
pickles,
lettuce,
yes.
cheese.
onion.
Yeah, that's
How
Yeah, I
do
that's
remember
you do
that.
that? Yes, that's it.
wow.
That's it right there. And yeah, I can think of some, I can also think of some other commercials, but they would really date me, so we're not going back that far. Yeah.
All right, I'll because we're talking about like commercials. I don't know how I don't remember this, but all right. So recently, I went on a trip with some friends, and one of my friends on our way back started playing. It might have been on the way up. Either way, in the car, yacht rock. Yacht rock music. And so I'm like, I've heard this music before, but I've never like, I don't know, maybe I should have, but I didn't know it was called yacht rock. I was like, what is this? And it's like y'all familiar with yacht rock, right? Like
Well, I've heard the term, but I'm like you. I don't really know what that's referring to. I probably know the songs, but I
you will
hadn't heard that
once
term until recently.
Spotify yacht rock and then you'll be like, oh my gosh, I know all these songs. It's like late 70s, early 80s
Huh.
songs that are about just sailing or like Michael
Okay.
McDonald. I mean, I keep going on. Anyway,
Christopher
do you
Cross.
Christopher Cross? Do you remember a commercial that was this guy would be like, "Hey man, do you remember classic rock?" And Layla would come on. It's anyway. I'm dating myself. It just took me back to those commercials from like the 80s where they were like advertising like 60 albums, you get it for 9.95.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, that's right.
Okay. I
How we
skewed off.
consume
I skewed
music back in
off.
the day. You know, but I mean
Yeah.
it's we have to bring back those 80s, 90s memories. This is great. Libby, thank you so much for joining us today and just kind of a chance to go down memory lane a little bit on some of these ads, but also to talk about the importance of positive social mourning campaigns and the approach of reducing youth substance use and the great example that y'all have been doing with Mountain Projects Mountain Strong out in Western North Carolina. So thanks so much for joining us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. And we'll see you all. Thank you all for listening and can't wait to get our next episode out to you. Thanks so much.